A mother's elaborate story to police hours after she reported her young son had been kidnapped. We first told you about the incident last May. Detectives say the mom lied to police as a desperate search for her 9-year-old son was underway. But that little boy turned up dead, and police are convinced his mom did it.
On May 21st, 2020, an Amber Alert was issued for 9-year-old Alejandro Ripley, a special needs child from West Kendall, Florida. His mother, Patricia Ripley, called 911, claiming her son had been kidnapped by 2 men, she said, dressed in hoodies and bandanas, demanding drugs and taking her son away. Her desperate plea sparked a massive search, with the community and police working tirelessly to bring Alejandro home. But just hours later, the unthinkable happened. Alejandro's body was found in a canal, floating lifelessly near a golf course. And as the dust began to settle, the carefully crafted story started to fall apart. Security footage and eyewitnesses painted a disturbing picture of the truth. Alejandro's mother, the one who claimed to care so deeply for him, was the very person who had led him to his death. But what drove a mother, who seemed to genuinely love her son, to commit such a brutal act? How could someone entrusted with the care of a special needs child betray that trust so violently? This is the story of trust shattered, of betrayal at the hands of a mother, and of a child whose life was lost in the most unimaginable way. But before we begin, I just want to take a moment to thank you, my incredible viewers and subscribers. Your likes, shares, and thoughtful comments don't just support this channel. They help keep these stories alive. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and become part of this growing community that believes every story deserves to be told, and no victim should ever be forgotten. Now let's get into it. Alejandro Ripley was just 9 years old when his life was tragically cut short. Born with severe autism and unable to speak, he relied on those around him to navigate the world. Living in West Kendall, Florida, with his parents, Patricia and Aldo Ripley, Alejandro was part of a family that, on the surface, seemed full of love and devotion. Patricia and Aldo had been married for years. From the outside, their life appeared to be typical. They were a family, raising their children together, just like many others. But Alejandro's needs, as a nonverbal child with special needs, brought challenges that the family worked hard to meet. However, there were times when the strain of raising a child with such intense needs began to show. Alejandro's early schooling had taken place at Greater Heights Academy, a school designed for children with special needs. There, he had been surrounded by caring teachers who admired his resilience. Though Alejandro couldn't speak, he found ways to communicate. His teachers noted his ability to express his thoughts and feelings through gestures and expressions. He was a child who, despite his difficulties, had a spark that left a lasting impact on everyone around him. Teachers and therapists who had worked with him described him as a child full of potential, someone who touched their hearts deeply. Mrs. Lorna, one of his early teachers, described him as an angel, saying that while he couldn't communicate in the usual way, his warmth and care for others were clear. However, as time went on, Alejandro stopped attending school. It was a decision that seemed to stem from a combination of factors, including the family's struggle to keep up with financial obligations. The Greater Heights Academy filed a lawsuit in 2016, demanding more than $4,000 in unpaid tuition. The legal dispute marked a significant turning point in Alejandro's schooling. After that, he was homeschooled, a decision that likely contributed to the isolation and increased pressure on Patricia as his primary caregiver. On May 21, 2020, at exactly 8:47 p.m., Patricia Ripley made a 911 call that would spark a frantic search for her son, 9-year-old Alejandro Ripley. She claimed her son had been abducted by 2 African-American men while she was driving down a quiet road in West Kendall, Florida. Patricia's story seemed clear, but it didn't take long for investigators to raise questions. According to Patricia, she had been driving with Alejandro when a light blue sedan suddenly forced her off the road. She described the car as being driven by two men, one of whom allegedly jumped out of the car wielding a knife. The man, Patricia claimed, demanded drugs, and when she said she didn't have any, he stole her phone, tablet, and her son before fleeing the scene in the sedan. Patricia's voice was calm as she told the 911 operator what had happened. She described the men as wearing black clothing, with bandanas covering their faces, and one of them, she said, had cornrows. The details of the abduction, though disturbing, seemed like something out of a typical crime. Patricia made it sound like a desperate, violent attack. She said Alejandro, at the time of the supposed abduction, was wearing a blue Captain America shirt and black Crocs, as if those small details could make the story more real. The Amber Alert for Alejandro Ripley spread quickly throughout the state of Florida, triggering a widespread search for the missing boy. Communities, volunteers, and law enforcement came together, hoping to find Alejandro alive. The search began with a sense of urgency. After all, this was an innocent 9-year-old child with severe autism who couldn't communicate or defend himself. The public's heart went out to Patricia Ripley as she seemed desperate for help. Hours passed in the search, with authorities combing every area they thought Alejandro might have been taken. Local residents, neighbors, and volunteers joined the effort, spreading the word and offering assistance. As the hours turned into a tense night, the search for Alejandro Ripley intensified. The community was filled with anxiety, not knowing what had truly happened to the boy. Patricia had created a compelling story of abduction, and everyone was desperate to find him and bring him home safely. Then, just the next morning, on May 22, 2020, a 911 call came in. A passerby near the Miccosukee Golf and Country Club reported something disturbing. They had seen what appeared to be the body of a child floating face down in a canal. Within minutes, Miami-Dade fire rescue crews rushed to the scene. They confirmed the worst. It was Alejandro. The boy, who had been missing for less than 24 hours, was found dead just hours after the Amber Alert was issued. His body was recovered from the water, a sight that shattered the hopes of everyone who had been looking for him. But that wasn't the end. In fact, this was just the beginning. As the investigation into Alejandro's death began, detectives would soon find themselves facing a harder truth, one that Patricia Ripley had tried desperately to hide. Despite the mounting evidence, Patricia stuck to her story. She insisted that Alejandro had been abducted by two men in a light blue sedan. She claimed she had been forced off the road, threatened with a knife, and had no choice but to hand over her son. But the detectives weren't buying it. As they began questioning her further, they found more inconsistencies that didn't match her timeline.
In the morning, and I take care of my son, and I left him in his therapy place.
Okay. How do you communicate with him?
Okay, Alejandro is a very smart kid, and he's pointing.
What time you guys woke up in the morning?
Okay, I woke up at 7 a.m.
Okay.
and my son at 9:30, and I was in the therapy place around 10:12.
It's approximately 10:10. You leave the therapy session, and where do you go from here?
I need to pass by Publix, diapers, milk, and things like that.
Where's the receipt for the purchases that you made at Publix?
I always say I don't want a receipt, but I have the card that I use.
Okay, which card did you use?
But I think it's my Bank of America.
How much was the amount, approximately?
Oh my God, I don't remember.
Has he ever been aggressive to you?
Never.
Okay.
He's very lovely kid. Es preocupado porque ni siquiera hace nada de mi hijo.
You are the last person that was with your son. Your husband and your son, we're pretty much done with them. They're also over there at the scene, the police. When Alejandro left the house, what was Alejandro wearing? What clothing?
He's wearing the black pants.
Okay.
Okay. and the Mickey Mouse shirt.
The surveillance video captured a chilling moment that would change everything. The footage, taken from a camera near the canal, showed Patricia and Alejandro walking calmly down the path. She was seen stroking Alejandro's hair, an image of a mother seemingly comforting her son. But what happened next was anything but comforting. Suddenly, without warning, Patricia shoved Alejandro into the ravine, pushing him with force into the cold water. The video clearly showed her turning around and running away, leaving Alejandro to struggle in the water. But fortunately, bystanders rushed to Alejandro's aid. Two men and an older couple came running to the canal when they realized there was a child trapped in the water. They pulled Alejandro out of the ravine, saving his life. One of the men lowered himself into the water, while others worked to get him to safety. They tried to comfort him, offering to call the authorities, but Patricia declined the help, acting strangely. Why wouldn't she want help for her son? After the rescue, Patricia and Alejandro walked away, leaving the bystanders confused and disturbed. But her plan was far from over. Patricia then drove Alejandro to another location near the Mikosuke Golf and Country Club, where she made sure no one was around. She led her son to a second canal, once again walking him to the edge of the water. This time there were no witnesses, no one to intervene. No one was there to save him. And this time Alejandro's fate was sealed. Patricia pushed him into the water once again, and this time there was no rescue. Alejandro was left alone, struggling in the water until his body was discovered the next morning. The unthinkable had happened. Patricia had succeeded in ending her son's life.
Say an hour later, she brought him to this spot at the Mikosuke Golf and Country Club and once again led him into the water. He was found floating there, lifeless, less than 24 hours later.
She later went on to fabricate the abduction story, but by this point, the evidence spoke for itself. It was clear to everyone involved. Patricia had planned and executed this horrific act. Then came the breakthrough. During a long, tense interrogation, Patricia finally admitted the unthinkable. Her confession was chilling. "He's going to be in a better place," Patricia said, as she explained how she had pushed Alejandro into the water the second time. Her words were cold, almost detached, as if she had accepted the reality of what she had done. There was no remorse in her voice, only a strange sense of finality.
He was found floating there, lifeless, less than 24 hours later.
We love Alejandro, and we not agree with whatever they said about my wife.
Alejandro's father, Aldo, spoke after Patricia's bond court appearance.
And with that, Patricia Ripley was arrested. She was taken into custody and transported to the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Facility, where she would face a long list of charges: first-degree murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, and child abuse with great bodily harm. When the truth began to unravel, Aldo Ripley, Alejandro's father, was devastated. The grief he felt for his son was immeasurable, but so was the shock. Alejandro's death was something he could not comprehend, especially when it came to his wife's involvement. In the days that followed the tragic events, Aldo spoke out publicly, expressing the pain that overwhelmed him. "We love Alejandro," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "We love our life. This isn't what happened." But denial was evident in his words.
We love Alejandro, and we not agree with whatever they said about my wife.
The idea that Patricia, his wife, had taken their son's life was too much for him to accept. He refused to believe it, holding on to a version of events that couldn't be farther from the truth. People from the community and beyond made their way to the Mikosuke Golf and Country Club, where Alejandro's body had been discovered, to honor him. The site became a place of mourning and remembrance as local residents, teachers, and caregivers expressed their sorrow.
And this family is absolutely devastated. Today, even through all the rain we've been having, people have been coming out, putting down flowers, putting down teddy bears to pay their respects to Alejandro, who was found just beyond these rocks on Friday morning. The details of this situation, absolutely shocking.
A happy boy. He was a loving boy, like all his family lost him. How can this be? He was a sweet little kid. He didn't deserve this. He was a world to his parents.
The legal battle was about to begin. Patricia Ripley's confession hadn't spared her from the consequences of her actions. But as the case moved forward, things quickly became more complicated. The case was delayed, like so many others, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Courtrooms were shut down, and trials were pushed back. The tentative trial date was set for August 2024, a long time to wait for a community desperate for justice. But it was still postponed. As the legal system prepared to move forward, the charges against Patricia were made clear. She faced first-degree murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, and child abuse with great bodily harm. A list of crimes that painted a picture of a premeditated and horrific act. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty. The premeditated nature of the crime, the fact that Patricia had tried to kill Alejandro once before and then succeeded in her second attempt, meant there was little doubt in the minds of the prosecution about the severity of her crime. But Patricia's defense team wasn't about to give up. Despite her confession, they chose to plead not guilty. They argued that mental health issues played a role in her actions, suggesting that Patricia may have been struggling with depression or burnout from caring for a special needs child. However, this defense was far from convincing. The brutality of the crime, the careful planning, the calm demeanor, and the lack of any significant remorse spoke volumes to everyone involved. So Patricia Ripley remained in custody, facing a future that seemed uncertain but grim. Justice for Alejandro is still in the balance, but the road ahead would be long and complicated. And with Judge Marisa Tinkler Mendez now overseeing the case, there was hope that the trial would take place at some point in 2025, but the timeline remained unpredictable. The world would watch to see if the legal system could bring the mother who betrayed her own child to account for her actions. As the legal battle raged on, another controversy unfolded. Patricia Ripley, who had already confessed to her role in Alejandro's death, was granted public defense funding. A judge ruled that she was indigent, meaning the state would cover the costs for experts, depositions, and other legal proceedings related to her defense. This decision sparked a heated public debate. Many people in the community felt it was inappropriate for taxpayers to fund the defense of someone accused of such a heinous crime. How could the state cover the cost of defending a mother who murdered her own child? It was a bitter pill to swallow for those who had seen the evidence and heard the confession. Questions soon emerged about the Ripley family's financial status. Despite Patricia's claim of indigency, it was well known that the Ripley family owned property in the Dominican Republic. People wondered why the state was picking up the tab for a case that seemed so clear-cut, especially when the family appeared to have substantial resources. And that brings us to the end of this case, a story so disturbing it leaves you questioning how many other children are suffering in silence. What are your thoughts on this case? Let us know in the comments. If this story shook you, there's more on the channel that dives into cases just as haunting. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video. It helps keep these stories from being forgotten.